Welcome, everybody. Over the past couple of weeks, we've had some wonderful conversations with members of Parliament Matthew Green and Peter Julian about expanding worker cooperatives across Canada. And today we get to go straight to the horse's mouth with London Brewing Cooperative. We've got David Thuss, who is one of the founding members of London Brewing Cooperative, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that company's history. They started from very humble origins, but have since seen multiple expansions and are really a centerpiece of the London cultural community now. So we're privileged to have David with us. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Colin. I really appreciate it. I have to say, having watched the interviews with Matthew Green and Peter Julian, I sort of felt, trying to figure out where I sat, given their prominence. But I really appreciated the introduction, and I really appreciated the work they're doing around, trying to make it easier and really expanding, the knowledge around cooperative. So as you said, we started from humble beginnings, as it were, but really beginnings that reflect what we believe in and how we think local economies work well. So we started up working inside the Root Cellar Organic Cafe, which then expanded to become a full restaurant. And they were started sort of coming out of On the Move Organics, which is a local organics produce delivery company, started by Jeff Pastorius in 2008. He, completed his undergrad and was sort of like, okay, now what? And was really interested in connecting folks in the city to the surrounding farmlands and those farmers and their story and the amazing produce they were growing. And so On the Move Organics sort of started with a home delivery, got space in the market booth, had enough food, and sometimes wanting to ensure nothing went to waste, started making smoothies and juicing and things like that. Eventually that became the Root Cellar Cafe, which was serving up coffee and using, again, local ingredients. And when the Root Cellar expanded after only about a year of operation and said, we're going to go full restaurant, we were there and said, and hey, there can be a brewery inside here as well. And we started out in 100 square foot space, really small, needed to sort of work with the kitchen crew so that we weren't overlapping. We utilized some of the same refrigeration space, but really all of that is to say we couldn't even have started as a cooperative without those relationships, without the supports from other businesses, and really understanding, to Peter Julian's points about Mondragon, about those kind of supports that exist, supporting one another. And so it was tremendous to get started in that space, because on paper, a brewery that size doesn't work. It just can't work with the legislation, with sort of a lot of the regulatory pieces, but we made it work by working with other businesses closely. And in 2017, we were fortunate to move into a larger facility along with On the Move Organics. So we now share a 12,000 square foot, what was formerly a stainless steel manufacturing plant. We share that. We've renovated. We have a retail space, a tap room where folks can come in, pre-COVID, regularly having euchre nights, having comedy nights, having Dungeons and Flagons for folks who enjoy RPGs. And we had a very successful Friday Night Live music series, as well as our Sunday After Tunes. And some of those things are coming back. Some of them sort of remain in an online space. But really, we were able to create an amazing community space. We're now distributing through the city in the beer store, LCBOs, and beyond. So sort of reaching out to the surrounding communities. And in terms of the home delivery, continuing to work with On the Move Organics. So when you order your produce from On the Move Organics for your weekly box, you can add in beers from our brewery, as well as a collaborative drink, our Forest City Botanicals line, which is an alcohol-free, but again, a really refreshing drink with lots of excellent ingredients that are going to make you feel better after having consumed it. And so it's really exciting. It's one of those things I can start pointing all over the place. We're doing this now, we're doing this now, we're doing this now. And so much of it is a result of that working together, of being really that community of like-minded folks as we continue to grow, and there's additional businesses that are sort of starting up in sort of the circle of sisters of businesses. So Lola Bees, which is the honey producer, is really exciting, and we're able to support them through sales of the Forest City Botanicals drinks. So yeah, it's despite everything over these past 18 months or so, where our spirits are pretty high given what we've been able to accomplish. And again, it's the community of businesses and the community support and all of that is critical.
That's fantastic. And I'd love to touch a little bit on how a company like yours has had to handle COVID and what might be different about dealing with COVID. But first, a couple of points that you brought up that I'd really love to delve into a little bit further. Really wonderful points about how, first off, we are now very used to communities being treated as temporary resources by big companies that come in, sometimes are useful for a short period of time, and then often leave those communities abandoned afterwards. And you really talked about building off of the history and the resources that were built up by various people of various backgrounds over time, and being so deeply rooted in the London community, and how that has really sort of created a decentralization of skills and resources that are able to support each other in a more kind of ecological fashion, you might say. And also the way that a cooperative approach is one that embraces collaboration and looks for opportunities to have useful collaborations with others in the community, and how that's really benefited you. Would you like to speak a little bit more to the sort of difference between that more ecological approach that you have, if I can say, sort of economically ecological approach that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Like all of the decisions as to where we would locate, what kind of beers we're brewing, are all very much reflect our local community, our farming community. And we always would say worker cooperatives don't just get sold and move away because the workers are there and that's what they do. The only caveat to that, of course, was Mountain Equipment Co-op, which, as a consumer co-op, you're like, well, they're reflective of the members, and things didn't go the way one would hope there. But for us, all of our worker owners live in the community. It's important to us to see the community thrive because we live in that community. And when I speak to like the farming community around us, we brew what we would say it's a London-based beer, beyond just the water. But we can't take those recipes we're making and just make them somewhere else. It's critical that we're getting our malts from Harvest Hop and Malt over in Guelph, where it's all organically grown, it's organically certified. It is an artisanal malting facility. It is a hands-on operation, and those malts have a particular taste profile. We've done things where we can do an A/B test of, this year's crop, that year's crop, and there are differences, and we celebrate those differences. It's not a blend of trying to say this is going to taste precisely the same. There are variances, and we celebrate those, and we really try to profile as best we can those farmers who are involved. So we've done collaboration beers where we really say, like, this is where those hops are coming from, and connect people back to those farmers. The idea of eating as a political act, the food you eat, we are very much like, beer is an agricultural product, and as such, where it's being sourced from, what you choose is a political act, because you're choosing to put those resources back into that community. And London is in an amazing location. We are so surrounded. It is not difficult to get out of the city and find farmland. We are so connected, yet disconnected so often when it comes to food. So again, starting with On the Move Organics and what the Root Cellar was doing and what Lola Bees is doing and what the London Brewing Cooperative does, is try to reconnect that. And so it's critical to us that where we are, has an impact into the products and the culture that we're creating.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some nuts and bolts, because I don't know about you. I'm not sure when you encountered the notion of a worker cooperative. When I was in high school, I never heard of such a thing. I didn't know what it was. So I wondered if you could go back kind of to the very beginning, and how did the whole notion begin? How did you come across this way of organizing and producing?
So for myself personally, growing up in a farming community on a farm, knowing about, the Hensel cooperative where we would buy things, being part of a grain cooperative, when you're growing and shipping, and my parents had always banked at a credit union. So growing up, the idea of cooperatives and that sort of the community driven development and support of businesses was always something I was very aware of. And when we started homebrewing, the four of us, and eventually five of the founding members, there was a lot of conversations around, I don't like to say we're not idealistic anymore, but certainly post undergrad, you're very idealistic, and you're looking how can we have that impact? And it was a lot about democratic workplaces and how do you find the work that's rewarding, but also ensure that what you're doing is reflective of everyone who's working there. And so it was really those seeds planting that worker cooperative. And initially we were going to be far more ambitious and have actually a consumer, producer, worker, cooperative, all under the same umbrella. And a wise cooperative developer said, start with the worker side, because there is so much work, and there continues to be a lot of work on the cooperative development side, which we enjoy, which we love, which helps to fuel back into the business, but it is additional work. And so he wisely said, all of those other pieces are important, but it's probably going to be too much. So we focused on the worker cooperative piece. We worked with the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation, so CWCF. We worked with the Ontario Cooperative Association, the OCA, around what would this look like? How do we ensure, when you're just starting up, 5 founders, we could all agree. How do you ensure that as you continue to grow that membership, that you have the feedback loop? How do you ensure that the say is there? And so we also determined and created, practices to have the democratic processes always happening throughout the business, always ensuring that as many voices at that table that can be present are present, and not telling folks to stay in your lane, not saying, well, no, you deal with that, this is being dealt with by other people, but always taking a very cooperative, the whole cooperative approach to it when it came to decisions, so that the impact, those who would be impacting would also have the ability to impact those decisions. So we were really enamored with the worker cooperative model of a democratic workplace. We were also really committed to the triple bottom line of cooperatives, of people, planet, and prosperity. Right from the start, we were buying organic whenever we could, buying local whenever we could. Only more recently were we able to get the organic certification, but that was a goal from the get-go. So a lot of the pieces of what cooperatives are, their responsive nature to the community, their responsive nature back to the employees, and really being about a place you're in. All of those things continue to inspire what we do today when it comes to the kind of beers we produce and the kind of events we want to hold and be a part of. We're a very values-driven organization that way.
I wondered if you could speak to, and you've had a company that's had a great deal of success, and you've kind of laid out the building blocks for that success very, very clearly. Of course, recently, like everybody, there have been challenges and tough times that no one really could have seen coming in advance, that no matter what one's business model is, there was no way of being adequately prepared for a global pandemic. Can you speak to a little bit how a company like yours is going to navigate a difficult moment like COVID? Or some other instance.
Yeah, it was really difficult, but I think what was critical to success that we saw, because the success was really around safety, and it continues to be in those initial pieces. And there's always that weird disconnect that businesses will do, is that this is the labor that needs to get done. Well, sort of discounting the laborer and the person who's doing that work. And so for us, we dealt initially with really the laborers, those workers, and what did they need? And for some, they needed to step back and be at home with their families for childcare purposes, for any health concerns. And so we did see a contraction of staffing, we saw an explosion of demand, but a contraction of our staffing because there was those employees who couldn't, and I was one of those employees. I couldn't continue to be on site, and I'm currently in my home office because of childcare needs and having a partner who is in healthcare and needed to be out, and doing what she needed to do in order to cope with COVID-19. So we started, at sort of the first step was speaking to the employees, seeing what their needs were, and then reflecting on, so what are the changes here? What are the shifts? And we have an amazing management team. We have an amazing group of people who work here, and there really was that pulling together, and that when a lot of people's contracts will say, and other duties as required, that really that was really something. We didn't have a robust home delivery program. We didn't have one at all. We were partnered with On the Move for any of our home delivery, and then suddenly home delivery was the thing. And it's happenstance, really. There's a lot of other factors that we were deemed an essential business, so we could continue operating. And so for those employees who could continue working, we could continue to employ them. And those were all critical pieces, but it was that coming together, listening to the voices of those within the organization that I think really set us up for success. There's when we look back, getting an online store turned around and up and running in less than 24 hours. It astounds me, the work that was done, the resourcefulness. And there's a commitment to the business and to the cooperative. To some degree, folks self-select when they apply to us. They know the kind of business we are, and so we don't have an issue of buy-in. People are really committed, and it still astounds me. It astounds me how successful we were able to be with the resources we had. But at the same token, I'm like, but that's why we trust these people so deeply.
Something that you mentioned is that you were and your colleagues were quite young when you began this, and when we look at the level of education that is around worker cooperatives, there are lots of people who come out of college or university. They're starting to think about being entrepreneurs, starting to think about starting their own companies. Do you think that there are missing pieces in the Canadian ecology right now, economic ecology right now, in terms of education around the possibilities that a lot of people don't know? That's something that maybe they would even start to do instinctively, look for people that they can work with well and start to put things together with them, but maybe don't have the educational tools as to how to structure that properly and turn that into something like a productive worker cooperative. Do you want to speak to how educational resources could be useful in Canada?
Certainly, yes. And some of our head brewer, for example, he was doing his graduate work in anthropology and was looking at things like urban gardening, and so it lends itself to some of those sort of community-based businesses and what that can do. Likewise, our head of sales, international development was what his undergrad looked at, and so I think we came into it with sort of an idea of change, and then cooperatives made sense. And likewise for the rest of us, we were sort of inspired by that. But yeah, in terms of the formal education, I've given talks at the Ivy School of Business here in London, but those are really one-offs, and it's a single day and a 2-hour talk about why cooperatives are a good idea, and why you may wish to pursue that. Similarly, I've given talks at to B Corps, or those who are aspiring to be B Corps, and sort of saying like, social good is social good. Like, that is great if you're going to have that as part of your mission. But I would say go beyond that and do the cooperative piece. But again, even, B Corps aren't, I don't think, talked about much in the business school. So I think if people came out with that idea, or even while they're, you're working a job through university or college, and you get, you have a basis of, hey, could we own a business that we're working in? Is that a thing? Could we do that? And I know the OCA is doing a lot of work around succession planning, of saying to current business owners, baby boomers who are sort of on the way out, like, have you considered transforming this into a worker cooperative and letting it be led and purchased by your workers? But I think it's a game changer if more people are just aware of the idea, have a grounding in the sort of the concepts. What does it look like? Because it is a snowball effect. We try to, as much as possible, it's principle 6 as well, support of other cooperatives, of pointing to other cooperatives and saying, we are but one cooperative. This is one way you could do things. And when we're bringing on new members, part of that orientation is, here is we are a cooperative. Here is what the other possibilities could be. Maybe we should be more like that. Maybe so we try to, as much as possible, educate within and to our customers and our community. But certainly if it was formalized in some way that the very basics, I think it's an inspiring idea to think that you're starting a business, you're bringing others in who can help to lead, and you just have automatically more voices at the table. And the diversity of voices is so critical. So I mean, from an education standpoint, that's what we would point to. And then there's the regulatory regime around this and all of those pieces. It makes it harder. It does make it harder when you're applying to become an incorporated cooperative, and there's sort of just, even amongst those who handle the applications, are like, oh, a cooperative.
Right.
Don't see much of those, not really sure. And there's a lot of times we feel like, the square peg into the round hole sort of problem. So there's the education component, but also beyond that, if you go to the business help center, are they telling you about cooperatives? Are they, are we doing that even for those who are like, okay, I want to start a business? There's that now. So there are sufficient barriers to becoming a cooperative, and legislation that is really outdated. And if those things could all change, it would at least equip those who maybe have learned about it in school to do something.
Yeah. Why don't we take, we're reaching the end of our time, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you've got a lot on the go, but do you want to maybe just quickly take a moment to let us know what is on the horizon for your company? What do you think what should we be looking to see in the next little while from the London Brewing Cooperative?
So what we've really been focusing on is actually expanding our membership, of getting more and more members on. And so I'm sort of excited about what ideas they may bring, because we have a lot of things that as we're growing in our community, we can do more things. We can give back differently. So coming out of COVID, I mean, a lot of it is, you're staying afloat and you're doing those pieces. So the long-term planning has really been to solidify the operation side, keeping expenses low. But we have been in talks with the London Environmental Network, as well as, and now I'm going to forget their name, but we were working with Green Economy Canada around some of the things we can continue to do to bring more, moving toward a net zero carbon footprint. So those are pieces we're looking into. So, as we look into that and try to determine feasibility, those are big things, but right now it's still really idea stage. But, we were so happy to get the organic certification. That was really critical. We are so supportive of our farming community. And so we have also been recognized as sort of a supporter of micro malting operations, so the craft malt world. So craft beer, craft malt, we would really like to see that all brought together and continuing to see other farms grow. So we've been able to grow with some of these hop farms, some of these, the micro maltery, because as we grow, we can purchase more from them, they grow, and you just see that sort of spread out. Then more farmers are going to say, hey, sure, I'll grow organic barley. That sounds like a great idea now that I know that I can sell it somewhere. So there's those pieces that the building blocks were in place, and now we're really seeing them come to fruition. We're seeing more and more breweries focusing on local ingredients. It's one of those things, it's part of our niche, if you were, if you would, but we really actually want to spread that. We want to see more breweries doing it. In September, we'll be hosting again our Truly Local Craft Beer Festival, where we invite breweries from across the region to come in and sell their beers that include local ingredients. So we're really saying we want to support you, but we want to also make sure that you're supporting local farmers. So if you have a beer that features local ingredients, be they adjuncts like maybe it's berries or it's pumpkins, or if it's something like hops, or the gold standard is everything in that beer comes locally. So we want to support that, and we want to continue getting it out there. And it'll be different this year, the festival, but it was really growing. And again, it's an education piece that people are really drawn to. So we're really just excited about seeing the outcomes of some of those pieces that we've been putting in. So
fantastic. I love that I get to ask you that question and ask what your company is doing next. And you speak about a whole community, and that's so refreshing. It's so refreshing, so inspiring. David, thank you so much for taking the time and for being here today. This has been a really wonderful conversation. And I think it's the sort of thing that people can turn to and go, of course, this makes sense. And it's something that I would want to be a part of. It's not the kind of, I think there was a study a couple of years ago that found that something like 82% of people hated their jobs. And when we see a company that is able to put its values into action, be part of a community the way yours is, and to hear the energy with which you get to speak about it and speak about the people that you work with, it's inspiring, it's uplifting, and it gives us a sense of this, that maybe what's on the other side of COVID could be better than what we had going into it.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Colin. I really appreciated this.